Welcome to the Quantum Healthy podcast. Today we have Heathar Shepard. I'm going to actually read her a formal bio and then I'll do a little informal one that I came up with. So the formal one is that Heather is an inspiring homeopathic practitioner and ancestral food chef. Her approach to healing is natural and undoubtedly effective, emphasizing removing root causes of illness. Notice it's causes. I love that. A reconnection with nature and eating fresh local foods. Her recipes celebrate our ancestral foods heritage, inspiring a reconnection with nature, seasons, and sunlight. Heather's approach to healing and food will make you feel vibrant and wild. Whether you work one-on-one with Heather, study with her, or indulge in her Primal Pioneer podcast, your health, food choices, and way of life will improve for the better. So the informal one is just to encapsulate all that, is that she's the pioneer of the Sunlight RX, which is what we're going to talk about today, and the Sunlight Diet. That'll be in another episode. She's an athlete. She's a homeopath instructor extraordinaire, a quantum instructor, again, extraordinaire, a very successful podcaster. I'm going to ask her how many seasons in a second. And she's a chef. She's a farmer. She's a truther, which I'm very, very proud of to know her. She's hilarious when you really get to know her. And she's just got this huge heart. She's a beautiful human being inside and out. And honestly, one of my greatest mentors. I'm gonna stop crying. I try not to cry, but
I will cry. So it's like, why not?
why
We're
not?
both such huge fans and have learned so much from you. I just
Aw.
very much
And
look up to you.
very much, from obviously as an instructor, my instructor in the homeopathy course, which Andeea hasn't benefited from yet. You never know.
Yeah.
But the podcast, Heather, that has been a companion on walks. And, I think we feel like we know you more than other people because you're so open and frank on that podcast. So everybody check out the Primal Pioneer. It's an excellent podcast.
Aw, thank you.
Okay, so there's so much that we could cram into this interview today. But we've chosen the theme of sunlight, and I'll just highlight it's my first podcast outside, trying to get the sunlight. And my husband did a lot of work to get me out here because I have a broken leg right now. So credit to Paul, as he's going to re-listen to this in the future. And so for a couple of reasons, we wanted to choose sunlight first. It is obviously one of the three pillars of quantum biology. We've really covered water. I think there's still more to go on water. And we've touched on sunlight. We've mentioned it over and over, but Heather is the OG for the sunlight prescription. So maybe she can tell us a little bit more about, well, yeah, we're going to get into that. And the fact that we know, and we're going to ask you this about your recovery, we know that this was a key to your recovery, your own injury. And also many of us coach our clients, and we've tried to make our own workshops and ebooks and sunlight challenges. I've seen people doing that lately. And yours is the foundation that we're all using. So it really makes sense to have you on. But before we do that, let's talk about you. Who really is Heather Shepard?
Myself that every day.
Can you tell us about yourself and what drives you? Because, like I say, we think we know you from the pod and as an instructor, but what drives you, Heather?
Well, all my listeners are probably like my friends that I really don't know because I'm very forthcoming and open with them. I was like, I wish I could just have everyone over and we could have a conversation. Because in person it's like, yeah, I can count on my one hand, how open and so forth that I can be and my wife can only hear so much about sunlight, so yeah. But I think you have done just moved about the introduction and I really
Oh,
appreciate it. It means a lot. And yeah, so I've been on a healing journey since I was 23 years old, really. I was an athlete up until about 23 years old, almost to the day. And then I got in a car accident, and then that changed my life, really the trajectory of my life I haven't gone back to the athlete world. It just isn't my path. It's For a long time, I tried to go back. When we get sick, we bump up against something. We're like, oh, if I could just get back to that person I was. And it's like, usually it's not about that. It's about how is this changing the momentum of your life? And I fought against that because I'm pretty obstinate. So I was like, oh, no, let me work out again and go back to my old job. And yeah, it didn't work out so well. And
What was your job?
well, okay, so I went to college and I played Division I basketball, and then after college, I went on to work for a company. It was basically the corporate world of athletics. I went and worked for a company in Tempe, Arizona, training professional athletes, Major League Baseball, NBA, NFL. It was like top of the line stuff. And I was like, oh my God, I'm 21 years old. This is amazing. This is my life forever. And I don't know how I landed this job. I must have, said the right thing or squatted really good or something. I really landed that back squat. I'm not sure, but I got the job and really loved the job until one day I was driving to work, lost control of my car, hit a telephone pole in two, and got a bad concussion, lost consciousness. I couldn't get out of my car, so my nervous system was really jacked. I couldn't. If anyone's read Waking the Tiger, it's like that when you're trapped into a situation. Those who can get out of this stressful situation, their nervous system tends to do better. And I know that's like a generalization. For me, that was definitely my experience because I couldn't get out of the car and the jaws of life had to come and open the car for me to get out. That messed up my nervous system. Sorry, I'm not sure what the PG rating is on the podcast.
It's the odds. We've had one already. We've had enough
Okay, all right, good, okay.
on the last interview.
Okay, right on.
She had a cancer journey, so
that's a lot
we
of
let her have it.
F-bombs. Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my nervous system and my brain were really impacted. And to sum it up, I could no longer perform physically in the way I once had as an athlete and training athletes. And my body wouldn't let me. I would have a lot of symptoms as a result of that. And so I would try, and then I'd have a migraine headache, or I'd be in bed for like a week because I'd get vertigo or a really bad migraine, or just totally floored with regard to exhaustion. So that eventually has led me to where I am today. But I tried to go back into that world for many years until I finally was like, you gotta give it up. Gotta give up the ghost. So when I did that, things started to shift. But then, I know we'll talk about sunlight and in another podcast, homeopathy, but those things really helped me heal so I could basically be active again and live life again, because I couldn't do anything, to be honest. I couldn't really do that much. Couldn't retain things mentally, physically. I couldn't exert myself. I'd get symptoms. So that was my Pluto. That was my like dark days of the soul journey. And it went on for far too long. I mean, do we really have to do something like that for 10 years? I guess I did to get it, But yeah, that shifted things to me eventually coming to understand how to use sunlight to heal my brain and nervous system.
Okay, let's start there. Was it an accident that you stayed out in the sun too long one day, or was this research? How did you come to this? To use
It
this as a
was, I
modality?
heard a podcast and someone's like, hey, watch the sunrise. And at that point in time, it had been, 7 years. And I tried everything. I tried everything you can possibly think of. And not that those things aren't good things or they won't benefit people, or I didn't find any benefit, but they never got to the root of my symptoms.
Right.
Acupuncture, chiropractic. I mean, you name it. I
Massage,
literally did everything.
physio.
Massage. They were great, amazing, but they didn't get to the root of my issue. And
No.
so then my symptoms would always come back, or they'd never leave.
Now you mentioned, well, no, I read in that bio, root causes. Can you explain why you say root causes as opposed to, because in the functional medicine world, they always use that root cause. And I've just come to that. I'm doing a web redesign, and I kept telling my web designer, I want it to be root causes. And I don't know why I feel so strong about this now. And she's like, she kept, she'd correct it because she thought it was just a mistake. And I'm like, no, to me, do we get that from homeopathy, the root causes, or where do you get that from? Maybe I get it from you.
Oh man, root cause is like a can of worms,
A whole podcast.
Because, yeah, but we can digress a little bit into it because I think it's important and what I experienced in my personal healing journey. And I can even give some examples of my clients because, there's typically never one root cause of anything. Root cause is like it's like everybody throws that word around, but I'm not sure. And I know I didn't know what it meant until I actually lived it and experienced it. And there are so many root causes to things on all different levels. And there's never one root cause. But, so I think we oversimplify it because it was very interesting, like how people think about this world, a word, and no, maybe, people always say no judgment, but I'm like, we have to have discernment. Like maybe that's a better word. We have to have discernment because people go, I just had a client who had SIBO, went to a naturopath. They said, oh, you have to take antibiotics. And I was like, well, the root cause of why you have SIBO, which everyone has some degree of, is because you took antibiotics in the past. And so it's like, we have to understand what are the root causes of things if we really want to tackle how to move forward with them. And there's a whole bunch of different root causes. In my particular situation, the specific anxieties that I struggled with after my accident definitely had some genetic predispositions. So that trauma activated genetic predispositions in my family line that I didn't have stress to the degree or, enough antibiotics or jabs, to get me to that tipping point of going into anxiety. The car accident was my tipping point that activated genetic predispositions on the nervous system level. Like on my mom's side of the family, my mom hates driving. She won't drive. She won't drive in heavy traffic. She'll only drive in her rural town where I grew up. Her mom never drove a day in her life. My mom has 5 sisters. Over half of them will not drive. After my accident, I was like, F you, I will not drive. I literally got panic attacks and I just had to okay, I'm not driving. That's just where I'm at right now. Why, not everyone who gets in a car accident is like, I'm not driving. Some people do. But for me, that genetic predisposition got activated. There's something in the line there.
Mhm.
And that was a huge symptom that I've really had to work a lot with. And that's a hard one. Be in a marriage and try to say you don't drive and when things have to get done and you live on a farm and you need things and it's like there's so much to navigate. But anyway, so one of the root causes where I'm going with this is this genetic predisposition on that level. And so we usually think of genetic predisposition as like some sort of disease pathology, like, oh, my dad had cancer, so, or diabetes and so forth. But there are also genetic predispositions on the mental emotional level, on, depression. If people in your family have committed suicide, the likelihood of that continuing in the family line is strong unless it's, addressed on a deeper level. So anyway, one of the root causes was my genetic predisposition on this anxiety about driving and so forth level got activated. That's one, but also another one is my brain when you have a TBI, your brain, the molecules in your brain vibrate at a different level, they dull. There's this communication between the gut brain axis gets totally chaotic. The structured water in the brain gets chaotic. It loses its structure. And so that definitely happened to me. And we can get into this about when I started to watch the sunrise. And not only that, put the pieces together for the Sunlight RX, huge progress was made in my brain. So your question is like, I heard a podcast and at that time I'm like, I heard every effing modality to try. And I went and I tried it and I was like, I was hopeful and then down, hopeful and then,
Yep. Yep.
And so at that point I was like, forget it. Who cares? Whatever. I'll get out and watch the sunrise. Like, yeah, sure. Like this is going to be a big deal. Like whatever. And literally on the first day, I noticed a shift and I was like, wait, what? And so we can talk about, I just kept going on from there. But that's how I started. It was kind of like, people who are vegetarians and they're like, fuck you, I'll eat a piece of steak just to show you I'm going to puke and have diarrhea after I eat it. And they eat the steak and they're like, huh, I feel amazing. That's how I was with the sunlight. I was like, fuck you guys, I'll go watch the sunrise to prove you wrong,
Right.
And I went out there and I was like, okay.
You have my attention.
There's some, yeah, exactly. You got my attention. Right.
Okay. Right on. Okay. So, okay, let's take you back to that time. Obviously, you were watching sunrise. Was that a 5-minute thing or was that a half-hour thing or an hour thing or
It was an hour thing to start
an hour
with.
thing? Okay.
So,
Okay.
yeah, it was an hour thing to start with because one thing that I work on is like, and especially being an athlete, and if you're 5 feet tall and you play Division I basketball, you gotta like work hard to prove people wrong. So I was like, oh, they told me to go out for 15 minutes. I'm gonna do an hour type of thing, right?
Same as this addict here.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
More is
Exactly.
better.
If 5 minutes or 15 minutes is good, well,
Yeah.
all day must be
The
really
best,
nice.
right? Exactly. Exactly. So I'm like, but actually, that's one. I'm not saying it works out for the better in other aspects of my life. Like, oh, I can, I'm just going to do this work and split this wood and do this and move this pile here. Doesn't work like that in real life with me. But the sunlight, it actually worked. That having that mentality.
The key was you weren't doing UVB for like the middle of the day for an hour. You were just doing that morning, right? Initially, just the morning or
Honestly, I kind of started all at once
okay.
because after the morning sunrise, so I'd go out for an hour, and I will say, I don't know, my car accident woke this rural life part of me up because I tried living in cities and I think it was okay for, at the time of my life, but after my accident, I don't do well in cities. My nervous system gets too jacked.
Mhm.
And so my wife and I have lived in very rural places. So we were in the middle of nowhere and I literally was naked as a baby, okay, doing
Okay.
the Sunlight RX.
Yeah.
So when I first started this, it was stark naked sunrise.
Right.
Okay.
Which was the prescription, right? Was that what you
It
heard in the
was,
podcast?
yeah, well, and that's the thing. They're like, you could go out and just watch it, or if you really want to do it primo, you could be, stark naked. And I was like, I'm going for primo.
Were you
I'm going.
grounded?
I was grounded,
Yeah.
yes,
Okay.
and grounded. And so I watched it for an hour and I was like, oh my God, I feel pretty good. Like, I feel awake. My brain feels different. And this is after one sunrise. And I think my brain was so starving for all of the phytonutrients and red light and blue
Mhm.
light combo in the sunrise light that it was
Mhm.
like, it was like a hallelujah type of moment. And so then I would go inside and I'd make breakfast and I'm like, let's just eat outside. Like, let's get crazy, And so then I'd go and I'd eat outside, and my wife was doing this with me because she's like, yeah, sure, why not? She at that time struggled with some depression and gut issues, and she's like, wow, this is amazing. So we were kind of both doing it at the same time. And yeah, so then I started going out for breakfast and then I'd come back in and I'd work and I'd go back out because it was literally like my body was just telling me, no, get back out there, get back out there, and I just instinctively started to do that. And that's how
Right.
it started.
Okay. Okay. So on that theme, can you walk us through what you call like what is you termed this the Sunlight RX, which I love. Can you walk us through what is the Sunlight RX and kind of go through the four main, I would call them wavelengths, you can call them frequencies, but sunrise, UVA, UVB, and sunset. And
Sure.
and if we I'm sure we'll have questions when you get to each one, but could you start with sunrise, really kind of going through like what do these wavelengths provide?
Sure.
Like what are the benefits? Are there any nuances we need to know? And specifically if someone has a health challenge, like you did, like you said, you were out there for an hour, like a lot of people are just doing 5 minutes of sunrise, or they're doing 30 seconds out of a window. Maybe you could just tell us if they have a health challenge for each one, what that entails.
First of all, okay, so let's just start with the frequencies and I'll weave some of those other questions in.
Okay.
I like your fireball approach. I love it.
Okay.
So okay, why, like, that's a good question because why did this even work? Like what made this whole thing, work? What made my brain feel better? Yeah,
Right.
and there is some, you can call it science or just nature to this whole thing about why it actually worked. So this is, and I'm sure you've had people on here talk about sunlight, so I won't go deep into the science, but I'll talk a little bit about it just to
No,
provide some
this
context.
that'd be wonderful. And actually, what I'll do is I'll take you. We'll go one by one because I've got really specific questions. I'll guide you through it. That might be even
Okay.
easier once you get there. Yeah.
Okay. So at sunrise, well, first of all, we have to talk about the eye clock because
Okay.
we all have heard of the term circadian biology, right? And or circadian rhythms. And it used to be a thing in the past where if you were a night shift worker, your rhythms were messed up and you had a higher instance of getting breast cancer. Studies were out on that. That's like how people first came to understand, to my knowledge, the importance of circadian rhythms, but it kind of stopped there. It's like night shift workers, bad idea, higher susceptibility to breast cancer, suicide, etc. And but over time it has really evolved and deepened, and we've really come to understand the importance of circadian biology and circadian rhythms in a much deeper way, in a more inclusive and encompassing way of all health. And so one thing that is really important from a scientific or physiological perspective is that we have an eye clock which helps us, our body, tell time. It like rules how our body tells time, what time of day it is, if it's at nighttime. And the reason why that's important is because the type of light that enters your eyes, which changes throughout the day, and then we go to nighttime, it's totally dark. And so depending on the type of light that enters your eyes, that sends messages and signals to the eye clock, which is basically just a hub behind your retina and all the way to your hypothalamus. This is like a telephone wire. And so the light comes through and it sends that message all the way back along that wire, and it tells your body what time it is. And depending on the time of day or night, your body will release certain hormones and certain chemicals and certain metabolic signals. And so this is why you hear a lot today that it's not just diet. We have to consider our light environment. There's so much more to consider because you're not going to get you're not going to get the light stimulus as strong through your food as you are through sunlight, or so
Which
basically.
I don't know that everybody has heard.
Okay.
That's a really good point to make because everybody, I think the majority still today think that diet's going to fix my
Yeah.
ailment, and they don't think to light. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that you said that.
Okay, that's good because sometimes I think I live in a bubble. So that's really good.
Yeah.
You
I
know,
think
be-
we still do a bit. It's coming though. It's
yeah,
coming. Yeah.
that's good to hear because so we have the eye clock, and we also have different clocks like circadian clocks along our skin and along our gut, basically along our whole entire body. And what determines how they function is the type of light that you're exposed to. So, for example, before, even after my car accident, I went outside sometime. I like nature. I'd go for a hike. I'd go outside sometime, and it was like, but never in the morning, really. It was like afternoon, or I'd go hiking or something like this. And I'd work most of the day online because I was, curating my online business at that time. So I spent a lot of time in front of the computer, and I slept like crap, and my anxiety levels were extremely high, and my brain felt foggy, and my gut was a disaster. And it's all because I was looking at basically one color temperature of light, which
Mhm.
from our devices, our phone or our computer or our iPad, whatever it is, that's predominantly blue light, artificial blue light. And we'll talk about that more, as I talk about each spectrum. But basically, that was destroying my hormones. And then my eye clock and so forth was only getting that one stimulus. It's because the color temperature of your screens is like summer solstice noon.
Right.
It's like what they all say. It's about 5750 Kelvin, which is the sun at its apex in the summer at solar noon. And so when your eyes and your skin are constantly exposed to that frequency, that's the message they're getting. Oh, this is the time of day it is. And at that time of day, which we'll talk about, your body is designed to just pump out heaps of cortisol. And so we have people like streaming Netflix or Hulu or whatever it is, just in front of a screen with no protection today. And then we have increased school shootings and like depression and anxiety and insomnia. And this part of the picture isn't considered. And now, like the tobacco industry, we have people so hooked on these things. We've formed attachments with our devices,
Oh, I know.
so much so that if those devices aren't with us, we get triggered on a very deep level, a mental, emotional level.
Mm-hmm.
Our
Mm-hmm.
safety, we don't feel safe. That's a whole other topic. However,
Yep.
we're
A good
addicted.
one too.
Yeah, we're addicted to the devices, and because of this basically cortisol fix, and there's so many things there. But anyway, I started to watch the sunrise, and so I finally was giving my eyes and eye clock and circadian biology a different light frequency, one that it was starving for, it was deficient in. I had yet to really expose my body to that frequency, which is primarily red and blue light at sunrise. And a lot of people are, anti-blue light, which from artificial sources, it is really harmful. But when it's in sunlight, it's always combined with other color temperatures, and it's extremely beneficial for our metabolism and our hormones and our energy levels. So at sunrise, you primarily have red and blue light. And so when your eyes are exposed to that and your skin, you're getting these frequencies, your body's starting to tell time in sync with nature. And so, contrary to a lot of people who are just like, oh, sunlight's good, and we're hearing all benefits of vitamin D today, and that's really going around, but you cannot make vitamin D at sunrise. We just want to be really clear about that. That's
Yeah.
impossible. You can't
Yeah.
do that. But you prep your body to do that by being in sunrise light. So the red and blue light starts to release cortisol from the anterior pituitary gland. And if you have a cup of coffee, or you're staring at like a very blue lit screen, or you're under fluorescent lights, cortisol is just going to boom, pump out of your system.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas this combination of red and blue at sunrise, it starts as a kind of like this drip, 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 this like trickle down effect from your brainstem, into your bloodstream.
Lovely.
Okay. And so that's a major difference of why, looking at your phone first thing in the morning, or having an espresso or a coffee first thing in the morning, you're going to really alter your cortisol release patterns in not so great of a way. It's going to be destructive to your health down the line. So, but when you're in sunrise and that's the first light you see, you start this process. You start this cortisol release, because you don't want cortisol to just boom, rush into your system at sunrise. You don't want that. That's going to be you're going to get to noon and you're going to be like, oh my God, I need to go to bed now. It's it's
Or
not.
another coffee. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the sunrise light, for one, red light is anti-inflammatory, and it really stimulates the structured water in your cells. And so my brain really needed that, and it needed that red light. And red light is present in all of sunlight, but at sunrise, you just have red and you have blue. And so your brain is getting optimized for the other light frequencies that come in later in the day, as well as your skin. And your cortisol release is happening at this trickle level, which is what we want. We want it to happen very gradually.
Can I ask if do you like at that time, and I guess now, do you sun gaze? Like, if you have access to the sun at sunrise, do you promote that? Do you think it's safe?
I think it's amazing. I
Yeah.
know that when I'm fortunate to live in a place that is very dry and it's very high in elevation, so the sky is often just blue, no clouds, and the sun is often, not always, but often unobstructed. So we get a lot of unobstructed sunrises. And I can say, even to this day, when I put a string of days together that it's not cloudy and I can wake up and just see the sunrise coming above the horizon, my energy levels even, and we're getting into the subtleties now of how I
Yeah.
feel after doing this for so many years, but I can tell a difference. And so I recommend sun gazing right when the sun is just coming over the horizon. It's one of the only times a day that it's, you know, quote unquote safe to sun gaze. And you can ancient people, there's stories and of them, like the more they sun gaze, the more that they can do it for longer periods of time. And I'm not telling you to stare at the sun and
No,
I'm not saying you have to feel into what works for your body. When you first start doing this, you might not be able to look right at the sun, even if it's right coming over the horizon. It might be too bright for you because your brain's not used to that light. So, but personally, I sun gaze for like the first 2 to 5 minutes of sunrise. If I can get it right as it's coming over the horizon.
nice.
After that point, your eyes aren't going to even let you do it. Your eyes,
No,
they're not, your body won't let you. And so don't force it. It's not good or recommended at that point in time, nor is it recommended in UVB light, but your eyes will definitely not even let you do that.
I know people love to do it at sunset as well,
Yeah,
and
sunset would be another great
yeah,
time.
myself included. That's where I have access on the lake, but also I've been to Costa Rica, into
Yeah,
the Pacific, down Mexico, and it's just like it's like a ritual there.
yeah,
Everybody goes to the beach, and everybody's sitting there watching it. It's so magical, to
it is,
actually. But I never look at it until it's doing that little dip in the ocean.
totally.
And it
Yeah,
really literally is the last 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and
yeah,
yeah,
it's a
yeah,
good call. Yeah,
I want to make sure we clarify for people like me in the Pacific Northwest. And when I was learning this, I had to be told this because I was under the assumption I had to go hunt down that sunrise and I had to go hunt down that sunset.
yeah.
And can you just tell people about getting other little nuances like it's okay that you're not actually seeing it if you don't have that view.
If it is an act of Congress for you to oh, I gotta pack my cooler in my bag and get in my truck and go up here and I this and then my dog and it's like, oh my God, that is not sustainable. It's
Right.
so stressful. Like, no, no. If you're thinking of moving in the future, maybe look for a house that encompasses that, but if you're not and you don't, please do not stress yourself out to this point where it's like, honestly, you're going to create tension in your relationship or your marriage and you're going to get burnt out and forget it. So, when you can see the sun and when it's out and when, ever that shows up in your backyard, then get out there and get in it. And at the very least, you go out at sunrise, even if you can't see the sun, your body's still going to get these, stimuli from just being outside in nature and in daylight. Okay.
Yeah,
So,
thank you.
oh my God, that drives me absolutely batshit insane. Move
I
to
think
the tropics. Take your whole life with you. Forget your family. Don't even worry about it. Like, you go and get your healing on it. It's like, sure, if you want to go take a vacation, but if you're talking about breaking up families so you can watch a sunrise, we got some serious problems here.
No, everything's quantized no matter what your latitude. You're
Yeah,
getting
it
what you
is.
need. Yeah.
It is. People lived out in all parts of the world and they could led healthy, vibrant lives. And
but
so,
I have had that experience though where, you know, in the winter here, and you don't realize it until you go south and you get, you know, you fix that IR infrared deficiency and you fix the UV light deficiency and you're like, oh my God, I feel really good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I once watched my mom. She was suffering arthritis and
Mhm.
she probably would in her 60s, early 60s, and really suffering, in Ontario. And she came down. We were living in Alabama for the year, and she came down for 2 weeks, I think. And I hadn't seen my mom like that. She was just vibrant and alive, and it gave her so much hope. And I thought afterwards, I wonder, I've now not then, I could never figure it out.
Yeah.
And now I look back and go, I wonder if she just was so deficient
Yeah.
in all those frequencies, and it improved her arthritis, and she could move, and she just came alive, and it was just a joy.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's awesome. I would say like the first couple years of healing my TBI, I would make a point to go to Mexico or Florida for a little bit during the winter.
Mhm.
And after having a few seasons of building up my sunlight exposure in the summer and getting really strong light, I no longer have that. That's no longer like, oh, I have to go do that because I feel horrible. It's
Right.
like your body adjusts, it builds up a surplus. You start to store the light in your cells. Your mitochondria get healthier, your structured water become healthier. And so you have
Mhm.
this more of this longevity to last you through the winter, you know, and that can take some time to build up, but it's definitely possible.
Yeah, I've been hearing, even if you do some cold therapy, for example, you can actually help maintain your tan. Sounds crazy, but
That makes
there
sense.
there
That's
there are ways, right?
yeah.
I want to make sure we get to UVA and UVB
Yes,
and
thank
sunset
you.
before before our hour's up. So let's move on to UVA. And yeah, we've heard you say that you love the UVA. So let's just start there. Why do we love the UVA?
We love UVA. A lot of places you can get it at least in part for some of the winter, but UVA is the solar spectrum that comes in after the red and blue light at sunrise. So we kind of go in this chronological order with regard to what shows up in the sky. And also, we have to consider that the nature also needs this chronological order for many reasons. If everything was just blasted with UVB light for the whole day, the plants would be really suffering. We need this gradual build up. So UVA is, if you struggle with depression, if you struggle with gut microbiome issues, if you struggle with addiction, this is like, this is your gold mine. This is like a champ right here because it stimulates dopamine and serotonin production when your eyes are exposed to it. And that is like, if you have been an addict, even if you're addicted to your phone, if you can't sleep at night, if your gut microbiome is a disaster, that is like those dopamine and serotonin. If that's all that UVA offered, that's amazing. That would be a life shift. But it also does other things. And so, well, one thing I'll say is that, the majority of serotonin is stored in our gut. But how does it get there? It gets there from UVA light and the gut brain axis. A lot of people, we always talk about the gut brain axis, and I think, and I don't know if science ever will prove this, for those of you who know me, I really don't like science that much because it's a bunch of lies most of the time. But some of it's, I'll just say that. But anyway, I don't think there'll be a
Or
good study.
or it's slow. It's slow to catch it. Like it's sometimes
Oh,
20 years behind, but by the time it gets through all the institutions and gets in the textbooks and
yeah, and who
yeah.
funds it are the people who want a specific result. So, you
Yes.
know, so this access, the gut brain access, I sense the primary role or purpose of it is to the light that enters your eyes is able to go down and communicate with your gut. And this is how a lot of our gut bacteria are actually established because you need different gut bacteria throughout the year. In winter, if you're not living in the tropics, you don't need bacteria that process simple sugars and fructose because it doesn't exist in nature. You need bacteria that process complex carbohydrates and proteins and fats and so forth. And in the summer, you need that. And so how does your body determine that? Well, the main way is through the type of sunlight that you're exposed to. So I think it plays a huge role in the gut brain axis, and UVA light is, especially this piece with serotonin. How does it get there? My sense is it gets there through UVA light. And so then you also have your melatonin gets recycled in UVA light, and most people think of melatonin as a nighttime hormone, which it is, and we'll talk about that with sunset. But your body uses up its melatonin stores at nighttime. You need to replenish those, and we replenish those in UVA light. So you don't release it, but you get a storage tank that builds up when you're in UVA, and this is really important. Yes, you're muted. I sense.
UVA is in the morning, but is it also before sunset? And can some of these things happen then as well? Or is it so important that they get done in the morning, UVA?
It's most important in the morning because the color temperature fluctuates a bit as you go towards sunset. You do, because we're building on this, we're going sunset, sunrise, UVA,
Hmm.
we'll get the UVB, and
Hmm.
then you do start going in the opposite order. Then you go, UVA, and you go backward.
Right.
But the time period, the strength, the hormones, everything's much different in the morning than even when cross over that threshold and go back toward in the opposite direction.
Mhm.
So, will it benefit you? Absolutely. Will it benefit you in the same way as when you do it in the morning? I haven't found that to be accurate. Yeah,
Another question, melanin, is that made with UVA? Do you know, or is it UVB, or is it both?
it's both.
It's both. Okay. Okay.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
okay. Then we could go to, maybe we'll save melanin for UVB because that's about tanning more so. But the question is, can you tan in UVA?
You can tan exceptional in UVA. You
Right.
almost look like a fake bake if there's just UVA. Like if it's the winter, it'll give you
Right.
a different tan. It does something different to the melanin, especially for people lower on the Fitzpatrick. Okay,
Hmm.
so people lower on the Fitzpatrick, meaning the lower. So it's a scale that is just about your skin type, and if you're lower on the Fitzpatrick, you have lighter skin, just naturally. Nature made you that way. And so your skin you'll tan. I don't want to say fake bake because that might turn people off, but your tan will not, it won't darken as much as if when you add UVB into the mix as well. But you can 1,000,000% get a tan in UVA light.
Okay.
Million%.
I have one more question on UVA because you just answered one of my questions. What is the Fitzpatrick scale? We'll go a little deeper into that in UVB. But before we leave UVA, I know that you've mentioned this about nitric oxide. Can you explain what's the benefit like to having that benefit from UVA on the body?
Sure. So nitric oxide is another molecule that's released, stimulated in UVA light. Basically, it relaxes your blood vessels, and so it allows your blood to flow unobstructedly and smoothly through your blood vessels. So anybody who has hypertension or is in constant fight or flight, this could be a really beneficial side effect of UVA light. So I would highly recommend it to anybody, especially everyone, will benefit from this and the capillary health and, is people's deficiency
Mhm.
in UVA light causing things like hardening of the arteries or compromised blood flow? Probably it's one of the causes for sure. So everyone will benefit from it, but especially if you struggle with hypertension, you I would focus on UVA, light. And again, I say these things are in chronological order. So each step builds upon the next. You can't just go out in UVA and get these benefits if you haven't first prepped your skin with the sunrise light. Okay. And so
Mhm.
that's important to note. And
Right.
if you can't get sunrise, then you're going to want to gradually expose yourself to the sun, and not just go all in balls to the wall at once because you might burn, especially if you're lower on the Fitzpatrick scale, which we'll
Right.
talk about more in a minute. So, but nitric oxide is definitely a positive side effect of
Okay.
UVA light. And you're prepping your skin to be able to absorb and utilize UVB light. This is why you tan a little bit in UVA, because you can't just go right into UVB and expect to tan. Your skin has to develop what they call in the quantum world the solar callus. You have to
Right.
have this thickening, and that's like, it's just so you can have a visual of the skin. Your skin's really not going to get that thick. It's just like, so but you're gonna, it's like a paint, it's like it's like a coat of paint on your skin, so that,
Which would be melanin, right? The paint would
which would
be
be melanin.
melanin. Okay.
Yes. And so this will prep your skin to be able to absorb UVB as that comes in. So your body's prepping for these things. It's taking the steps to prep for UVB, because if you just go, and maybe this is a good segue, but if you just go into UVB and you haven't
Mhm.
prepped your skin, and especially if you're lower on the Fitzpatrick, what are you going to do? You're going to get all the things that, oh, I told you you were going to burn, and you get sunburn, and you're a white Irish person, or you're white whatever, and it's like,
Scandinavian. Yeah.
yeah, and you're Canadian, and so you're gonna burn, and it has nothing to do with your nationality or your culture. I mean, in a sense, meaning you can prep your skin to be able to be in UVB light without having these, basically the side effects of burning your skin. So the longer you're in sunrise light, the less you're going to burn when UVB light shows up, because you've put a serious coat of paint on your skin. So it's like, it's this protection. If you don't put that on, your body views UVB light as a stress. And like everything in life, you can go like over the top and just like, oh, I'm gonna eat carnivore and people only eat meat and there's nothing else that can happen, right?
Mhm.
Which then things start to tip. The same thing, you've got to prep your skin so your body can actually benefit from UVB and not get the negative side effects. You can go either way, with
Yep.
UVB.
It's nature's sunscreen.
That's exactly right. It's nature's built-in sunscreen.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you mentioned the solar callus. Okay, the Fitzpatrick skin typing, people can look that up, but I can't remember if there's 5 or 6, but
I believe there's 6.
6, yeah. I
And
tried to look it up myself, and I think I came up with a 3 or a 4, but yeah, I think if someone is very pale and, has blue eyes
yes.
and they look at the sun and burn, really they should look that up, and I mean, they already know that they burn, but I think it's good to know your skin type and work with that. And then I tell every Canadian that's a sunbird, that goes down south in the
Mhm.
middle of winter, the number one thing you need to do is get out at sunrise and then get that UVA, because
Yeah.
a lot of them, they party and then they sleep in and then they
Yeah.
head up and then they wonder why they're all fried, and I
Yeah.
think
Yeah.
that is more dangerous for photo aging and for,
That's right.
you know,
That's how
for
you get all the stuff
skin
they talk
cancers.
about. And then they convince you, oh, it's the sun. And in part, it might have been the sun, but you misused it. You misused
Misused
it.
it. Yeah. Yeah,
And
that was a question I wanted to ask you. We're starting to hear this about a lot of the research on skin cancer, that they didn't use full spectrum sunlight in that research, that they used like a narrow band light. Just with the Sunlight RX, have you dove into that research at all to verify that?
okay, so let's start with the Fitzpatrick and then I'll go to this
Okay,
question. So
that's
the
good.
Fitzpatrick scale, you can Google it, but please don't take to heart what they're telling you. They're telling you if you're lower on the Fitzpatrick, you're at a higher risk for skin cancer when you're exposed to the sun, and it's horse crap, okay? It's absolutely inaccurate if you follow the Sunlight RX in the chronological order. So don't use it as how they're telling you to, really. How you want to use it is, oh, I'm lower on the Fitzpatrick. That means I need to spend more time in sunrise light so I actually don't burn in UVB light. And so that's how I recommend using it. So people who are, and even if you have tan skin right now, you have to look at the scale as where you are, what you're from a heritage standpoint, because I could, right now on the Fitzpatrick, I might be a 3 or a 4, but if I started to go out just in UVB, I would burn, because really I'm lower down on the scale. But and so then you have, like, I believe it's a 6, which is like people from Kenya who they're
Yes.
very dark. They almost look purple. They have this, and so the higher up also you get on the Fitzpatrick, the more UVB light you need in
That's
order
right.
for your physiology to function at an optimal level. And it's because, typically, if we just look back over history and nature, is that people, I don't know if this is accurate or not because, I'm skeptical of a lot of things. Okay, they say we all originated in Africa. Maybe we did. And so, but people lived closer to the tropics and they nature created this darker skin color because it's all of that melanin prevents against UVB damage. And
Right.
because they live so close to the equator, that they need that built-in protection, or else they would suffer. They would have consequences from too much sunlight exposure. So now we have people obviously have migrated away from the tropics of all varying different Fitzpatrick types. So we have to keep in mind that if you are higher on the scale, it would be of benefit to get as much UVB light as you can or stored up in the summer months if you don't live in the tropics. That's your body, from a biology, a physiological standpoint, your body needs it.
Okay.
Now, so that's how I use the Fitzpatrick scale. Now, in terms of sun cancer and skin cancer,
Yeah.
that's the biggest health scam of the entire it's right up there with you need your gallbladder out and a hysterectomy, which some people do need those, but this is way up there because if we just take science out of it and we come at this from a common sense standpoint, most people today spend exceptional amounts of time in front of a screen, but they go outside, some people don't even go outside every day. It's like some people basically live indoors. But the dermatology, they've convinced you,
Profession.
yeah, profession, they've convinced you that you have these spots on your face or skin because of sunlight exposure, and nobody goes outside today. It's like, how does that even, doesn't even make sense. It
Mhm.
doesn't even make sense. So, but people do have skin spots and they do have these things, but I think it's from blue light. I do not think it's from sunlight. And I think it's from sunscreen use also. I do not think it's from the sun.
Yeah, I can speak to the research because I heard Dr. Alexis Cohen a couple of times explain this. So the basal and squamous cell cancers that people will get if they are misusing the sun is 0.3% of those people. I think it might even be 0.03% of those people would die. So hardly anybody dies from
Right.
those squamish and or basal cancers, and the cancers that people are dying from, breast cancer, prostate cancer, and all these other cancers that do have a really high death rate are actually a deficiency of the sun.
It's so
So
important. We have it so
yeah,
backwards.
yeah.
If people only knew that, you know?
And also all the research was not done in natural sunlight. It was done with isolated lights, hence why Dr. Cohen she's building actual natural sunlight lab. So that's why.
To do research on that. Yeah. I also heard too, if you get one of those, they call them SCC or BCCs, those cancers, it's a sign that you're going to live a long, healthy life. You don't typically die from them. I mean, I think
You
squamous.
don't get, like she said, 0.03. It's
Yeah,
literally,
it's
you
really
will not
small.
die. And here's the thing, if you cut anything out of the body, it will come back, and it usually will come back double, triple. So then you cut this spot out of your skin. Oh, and then next year I got one here, and then next one I got one here. And it's like, that's, then you're just like playing into they're like, I told you, they're playing into your game, and then they convince you. But when you cut something out, it will come back again and maybe double, triple. And that's exactly, this keeps people right in that system.
Mhm.
And they're convinced that they have, oh, my skin cancer came back and this came back. And it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
this is,
Yeah. Obviously, melanoma, pretty darn serious.
Melanoma is caused by a vitamin D deficiency, and
Deficiency.
it usually it's like doesn't occur on the face typically.
Yeah.
It occurs in places where sunlight hits the least, the back, the calves, the thighs, and
Right.
it goes, and that can be a very aggressive cancer, and all even science says this is a sunlight deficiency issue.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a good segue into, benefits of UVB. We know vitamin D is one of them. And I
Yeah.
remember first listening to your podcast, Heather, and this just hit me and I just loved it and it stuck with me ever since. And you said something like, I hope I'm not misquoting you. You said something like, think of your freckles as little suitcases for your vitamin D that carry you through the winter. So you do not need to worry about supplementation. And I was just like, I love my freckles. Let me collect my freckles, my little suitcases.
They are, yeah.
I get the same thing on my hands, like what we think of as the age spots. I'm seeing
Yeah.
that more and more in my 50s. And then they go away in the winter. And I'm like, I'm okay with them. It's like, okay, they're carrying my vitamin D into the winter.
That's right. UVB is when we make vitamin D, but anyone who struggles with diabetes or overweight issues or struggles, energy levels, insomnia, UVB, it's like you get out in UVB and this whole, it's like it charges your battery. It's like all these other things are going to charge your battery. And then you get to UVB and it's like a superpower. It's like, this is like a supercharged battery. The structured water around your cells is like boom, blows up. It's really it's a superpower. That's how I like to think of it.
I love it.
Yeah. And sometime during the summer, you can't stay out for as long as you could in say sunrise and UVA because it's so effing hot, right? But you can do it in sips, you can get like 15 minutes at a time and build up your exposure. But what happens is you're going to build your melanin levels no matter where you're at in the Fitzpatrick, you're going to build your melanin levels. And the more you build your melanin in this light in the summer, then the less you're going to have the issues like Laura was describing about her mom. You're going to be able to last through winter longer without being symptomatic or with being less symptomatic. And you may even get to a point where you don't struggle with that after, committing to your practice for a few years or so. So UVB is a superpower. You're at the apex, the sun is at its apex, and now the cortisol is like flooding out. Okay. And so as you are moving towards the apex, there's a little more cortisol, a little more, a little more, a little more. You get to the apex and we're at like full peak cortisol release. Anyone who has hormone imbalances, this will it be a cure-all? I have no idea about your particular case, but it sure will help. It'll help a lot. So this is the brightest part of the day. You have UVBs hitting your skin, you're building your vitamin D levels, you're building your melanin stores. Like, Andeea was saying, then people in the lower Fitzpatrick especially tend to develop freckles. And this is nature's freaking ingenious way of storing UVB light. So when it goes away, it pulls on these stores and uses it to help fuel and facilitate immunity and other functions in your body that are absolutely necessary that we need UVB for, metabolic health, hormone health. And so, yeah, I mean, I love all the light spectrums. UVB is like, oh my gosh, it's so good. If you follow the Sunlight RX protocol, I mean, you should feel different in your body. You should feel different in no matter what you struggle with, because we all need these things because it synchronizes our circadian biology.
I gotta ask this just because people will ask, but sunglasses, sunscreen, just a quick thumbs up, thumbs down.
We're going with
Maybe
a
one.
quick thumbs down.
Okay, I thought so. Okay, what about tattoos?
Ooh, okay. If you are thinking about getting it,
Yeah.
think it. If I were to get tattoos, I'd have like a chef's knife. I've had an avocado. I'd maybe have like a cow horn. I can't do it. I can't do it because I'm like, oh my God, but I can't because I know it's going to decrease the amount of melanin my body makes. So I'm like, oh man, I want it so bad, but I can't. And I just have to make peace with that. If you already have it, you probably need a little bit more sunlight exposure because it will take more effort, so to speak, for you to produce melanin. And that's an important, you want to be able to have that function. So
Melanin and is it your understanding that you can't produce vitamin D through a tattoo?
vitamin D will be really hard to produce as
Yeah.
well. It'll be
I also
harmful.
I heard some crazy story. I don't know, the wives' tale of this person that got totally tattooed, but they wouldn't let him tattoo a square on his back because he needed. Apparently, you can't sweat as
I
well.
would not
And
doubt that.
yeah,
Wow.
it was crazy story. But anyway, okay, we could do a whole podcast on that. We don't want to go there. The other thing I wanted to ask you, we're almost. Oh, just deminder. Just want to mention it as a tool. I know I did that when I first started my practice, and it
Yeah.
was really helpful to see either how slowly the vitamin D was building because you it's an app that you plug in your age, where you live, the amount of clothing that you're wearing, and then it knows, I guess it knows the time of day, then it knows your latitude, and you put your address in.
Yeah.
And I thought it was quite brilliant. I mean, I don't know that you can't say for sure that you're actually getting that amount of vitamin D, but theoretically that's the amount that you should get. And it was interesting to try and do it in, let's say, March, end of March here when the UV was really low versus July. Even I'm at the 45th latitude. It was like, wow, watch those numbers just climbing like crazy. So I like to coach my clients to tell them about it initially, but it's not something I do now. It's kind of just a fun app now, but I don't know. Do you use that? Do you coach that?
I think it's a great tool for beginners. So
Yeah.
because you can tell, oh, when is UVA in my area? When is UVB in my area? And you can tell as you're starting to build your Sunlight RX practice, oh, now's the time to go out for UVA. Now's the time to go out for UVB. This is how strong the UV index is. The higher the UV index, the stronger the UVB. And there's varying degrees of strength of UVB. In the northern hemisphere, we're now going backward. The
Mhm.
UVB is going to start dipping. And so, the melanin you produce isn't going to be as extreme or robust as it was, you know, in the middle of the summer. So I think it's a great tool. I don't use it anymore either because I've kind of trained myself to know when these
Okay.
things are happening. But if you're first starting, that's an amazing tool to access to help you tailor your practice to where you live. Or let's say you travel and you can put it in and you can then say, oh, here's where it is now. I think it's an
Right.
amazing tool.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes, definitely
I
so.
help people, with recovering from addiction. And because UVA is so critical, I remember being very intimidated when someone said, "Oh, UVA is when the sun's 10 degrees in the sky." Like I'm freaking supposed to know when the sun's 10 degrees. And
Right.
I love that part of the Dminder app. It tells you, and you
Yes.
will start to be so in sync with nature that you won't need the app anymore eventually. But it is lovely to know when that UV rise is happening. I remember when I first started using it, being so excited that I was out there when it was 9 degrees because I was about to get that UVA rise.
Yes.
And yeah, I think it's really helpful. Well, we're a little bit, oh,
Yep.
it's 111 right now, angel
Oh,
number. So that is a perfect time for our signature question for you, Heather. And that is, what does quantum healthy mean to you?
Wow. I love this question. I'm not great at surprises, so it's a good question. Quantum healthy means to me, I think this has changed over time, but to me, it means living in sync with your local environment as much as possible. And that's from sunlight to food to animals you raise or eat. And if you can do these things as much as you're able, it supports on so many levels from your health to then it takes epigenetics to a whole other level because now you're training your kids and other people to now do this that we've gone way away from. And we're also supporting our local economy and the local soil, and it's a whole thing. So I say, like, local as possible.
That
mic drop.
Yeah, that's a beautiful answer. And that actually is a great segue into my surprise for you. So I was listening to your podcast very recently, and you mention on there that you want to be a Gen Xer. And I'm a Gen Xer. So right now, I'm going down on the record. I hereby declare Heathar Shepard a Gen Xer, especially based on that answer you just gave.
Yes, I made
I
it.
love it.
Oh, awesome. Okay, so where can people find you? What do you have to share with our audience? I know you have a lot of beautiful offerings.
So many offerings, Andeea. You can find me on my site, heathershepard.com. And there you can learn about me. You can book a homeopathic session. You can get a copy of the Sunlight RX ebook. It's under $20. You can learn about my homeopathy school that I'm starting a new program this September. And I have 2 Substacks, one that encompasses my farming life and one that encompasses my homeopathic practice. So it's Eat, Heal, Farm is my Substack for the farm, and Study Homeopathy is my homeopathic Substack. And I talk a lot about healing and eating and much of the things we covered on today's episode. So those are some places. And I'm Eat, Heal, Farm on Instagram.
Awesome. We'll make sure we link there for everyone, and we're definitely going to have you back to talk about ancestral eating and homeopathy.
Homeopathy and maybe even one about the farm, because there's just a ton to learn there.
Yeah.
I've got a little thank you for you, Heather, because you are a special guest to us, because we know you've taught us. And for everybody listening, if you've seen me shifting around, it's because I have a broken tibia, and she's actually my homeopath right now and helping me through this new challenge. So Heather, thank you for inspiring so many of us to rewild our lives. And you talked about it today. I really love this. I didn't realize that a lot of us, we have a sunlight practice. So thank you for, teaching us to commit to that sunlight practice.
Yeah, you bet.
Thank you for the courage to speak your truth. We've heard some today even that, will fall on some angry ears. I don't know, or people that will be challenged by it, but, not everybody's ready to hear it, but you're willing and courageous enough to speak. Thank you for just getting us back into nature by just the way you are living, your example. I've got a dog trying to get out here. Sorry. I got to watch my leg. For your suffering 10 long years with your concussion, and to figure out the sunlight, there are no mistakes, there are no accidents, right? And it took you that long, but you know what? I just can't believe how many lives that you're going to benefit, along that journey, from that journey. And just, yeah, thank you for sharing, taking, it probably isn't easy to start a podcast and be as personal as you are on it, and to be open and vulnerable so that others can learn. So thank you so much for that, and for being on Quantum Healthy today. And we really, really, truly want you back.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me. I really, really appreciate it. It's so good to be here with you both.
Awesome. Thank you again so much, Heather. And everybody listening, thanks you for tuning in, and we will see you next time.
Thank you so much for listening to the Quantum Healthy podcast. We hope you found some value in this information. And if you feel inspired, please share it and leave us a 5-star review. This will help us reach so many more people. If you want to connect with Laura, you can find her at laurakistmanwellness.com and Andeea at andeearay.com. Links are below in the show notes. Now, go find some sunlight and embrace your own quantum healthy.